What if I told you that the moment you finally become consistently profitable isn't when you learn more about markets, but when you unlearn almost everything you brought with you? Most traders spend years adding strategies, indicators, and complexity. The profitable ones? They spent those same years subtracting. Subtracting ego. Subtracting certainty. Subtracting the very identity they walked in with. Today, I'm going to show you the 3 psychological demolitions every winning trader survives and why you can't skip even one of them without paying a price that'll cost you more than money. You know what's interesting? I've spent decades watching traders come into this profession with their college degrees, their intelligence, their work ethic, their determination, all the things that made them successful in every other area of their lives. And then I watched the market systematically dismantle every single assumption they have about how success works. It's not cruel. It's just honest. And the market's honesty is the most expensive education you'll ever receive. You've been lied to about what makes a trader successful. Not maliciously, just incompletely. Everyone talks about strategy, risk-reward ratios, and backtesting. Everyone's got a course on technical analysis or a system for reading price action, and none of it is wrong. But here's what nobody tells you. Here's the part that gets left out of every trading book and every YouTube tutorial and every mentorship program. You can have the perfect strategy and still lose everything. You can know exactly what to do and still not do it. You can understand risk management intellectually and still blow up your account emotionally. Because trading isn't a knowledge problem. It's a psychological reconstruction problem. And you're stuck in a loop right now. I know you are. You learn something new, you apply it for a while, maybe you even see some success. And then you self-sabotage in a way that feels completely out of your control. You overtrade. You revenge trade. You move your stops. You take profit too early. You skip the perfect setup because you're scared. And afterwards, you beat yourself up. You promise you'll do better. You write it down. You make rules. And then you do it again. And the brutal truth? This isn't a discipline problem. You're not weak. You're not stupid. You're not broken. This is a developmental problem. You're trying to trade with a psychological operating system that wasn't built for uncertainty. Your brain was designed to find patterns, to seek certainty, to avoid pain, to protect you from danger. And every single one of those survival mechanisms that kept your ancestors alive on the savannah will destroy you in the markets. Profitable trading doesn't emerge from adding more knowledge. It emerges from 3 distinct surrenders. 3 deaths, if we're being honest about it. Giving up the need to know. Giving up the need to control. And giving up the need to avoid loss. These surrenders don't happen because you decide to be more disciplined. They don't happen because you read the right book or found the right mentor. They happen because the market forces you through 3 very specific stages of psychological reconstruction. And here's what changes everything. These stages are sequential. You can't skip one. You can't do them out of order. You can't fast forward through the pain. But once you understand them, you stop resisting them. You stop thinking you're broken. And you start recognizing exactly where you are in the process. By the end of our time together today, you're going to see your past trading failures differently. Not as proof you can't do this, but as evidence you're already halfway through the transformation. You'll understand why your biggest losses weren't random, but necessary. And you'll have a map for what's coming next, so you can move through it consciously instead of blindly. So stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you isn't theory. It's the pattern I've seen play out in thousands of traders over decades. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let me tell you about a trader I worked with years ago. We'll call him David. David had a strange problem. For his first 40 trades, he couldn't lose. And I mean that literally. 40 trades. 40 wins. Small wins? Sure. He was being careful, playing it safe, following a simple trend-following system in a market that happened to be trending beautifully, but 40 for 40 nonetheless. And everyone around him thought he was a prodigy. His friends were asking him for tips. His family was telling him to quit his job. He was starting to believe his own press. But I watched his face during those trades, and I saw something nobody else did. Terror. Pure, unfiltered terror hiding behind a smile. Because David knew something the celebration was drowning out. He had no idea why he was winning. He'd stumbled into a trend. His strategy happened to align with market conditions. He was taking trades that felt scary to him, but they were working, and he didn't know if it was because his analysis was correct or because he'd gotten lucky with timing. And deep down, in a place he didn't want to look, he knew his winning streak wasn't skill. It was luck wearing a disguise. Then came trade 41, a setup that looked just like the previous 40. Same pattern, same risk reward, same everything. He took it, and it lost, just stopped him out. No drama, just a clean stop hit. And something inside him cracked. Because now he didn't know if his strategy was wrong, if the market had changed, or if the previous 40 wins had been the anomaly. Trade 42. He took it, but this time with doubt. Lost again. Now he was second-guessing everything. Trade 43. He skipped, even though it met his criteria. It would have won. Trade 44. He took out of guilt for skipping 43. It lost. By trade 50, he'd given back everything. But here's what's important, and I need you to really hear this. David didn't fail because he started losing. Losing is part of trading. David failed because he'd never learned how to lose. His identity had crystallized around being the guy who doesn't lose. The guy with the hot hand. The guy who figured it out. And the moment that became unsustainable, the moment reality introduced herself, he had no psychological foundation to stand on. The market hadn't rejected his strategy. It had exposed that he'd never built one. He'd been riding a wave and calling it swimming. I see this pattern everywhere. Traders who have early success, and that early success becomes a prison, because now they have something to protect. An image. A story they tell themselves. And the moment the market challenges that story, they don't adapt. They break. Have you ever been so afraid of being wrong that you'd rather not know the truth? That's where David was. He stopped trading rather than face the possibility that he didn't know what he was doing. And in a way, that's the most honest thing he could have done. Because the alternative was to keep pretending, keep trading with an identity that had no foundation, and the market would have taken not just his money, but his confidence too. Now, let me give you a different kind of story. A metaphor that might land in a different way. Imagine you're holding a glass of water. Simple, right? Someone asks you how heavy it is. You look at it, you feel it in your hand, and you say, "Not very heavy. Maybe 8 ounces. Just a glass of water." They nod. Then they ask you, "How heavy is it if you hold it for a minute?" You think about it. Still 8 ounces. The water doesn't get heavier just because time passes. That's not how physics works. "Okay," they say, "what about an hour?" After an hour, that glass doesn't feel like 8 ounces anymore. Your arm is shaking, your shoulder burns, your fingers are cramping. You're thinking about nothing but that glass. The weight hasn't changed. The water molecules haven't multiplied. But your experience of it has transformed completely. What started as effortless has become agony. Trading is that glass. The strategy, the rules, the setups, the risk management, that's 8 ounces. It doesn't change. A 2% risk is a 2% risk whether you've been holding it for a day or a year. But how long you've been holding it, how tightly you're gripping it, whether you're trying to control it or just letting it rest in your palm, that's everything. And here's what most traders never realize. The stages we go through, the 3 demolitions I'm going to walk you through, they're not about learning to hold the glass better. They're not about building stronger arms or developing more endurance. They're about learning when to set it down. What if the heaviest thing you're carrying isn't your losses? What if it's your need to control the outcome? What if the weight that's breaking you isn't the market, but the story you're telling yourself about what the market means about you? Just sit with that for a second, because we're about to go deep into the first stage. And I need you to understand something before we do. These stages aren't failures. They're initiations. And you can't become a consistently profitable trader without going through all 3. Stage 1. The death of certainty. This is where most traders live for years without even knowing it. You come into the market believing that if you just learn enough, analyze enough, prepare enough, you'll know what's going to happen. It makes sense, right? That's how everything else in your life works. You study for the test, you pass the test. You work hard at your job, you get promoted. You follow the recipe, the cake comes out right. Cause and effect. Input and output. The universe rewards preparation. And then you start trading. And the market's first job, its primary educational objective, is to kill that belief. Not gently, not gradually, violently, repeatedly. Until you stop flinching every time it happens, you'll have trades where you did everything right and still lost. You analyzed the chart perfectly, you waited for confirmation, you entered at the ideal price with the perfect risk-reward ratio. You managed it flawlessly, and it stopped you out. Just stopped you out for no reason you can see. And then, just to add insult to injury, it went on to hit your target without you. And you'll have the opposite experience too. You'll have trades where you broke every rule and won. You entered on a hunch. You risked too much. You didn't wait for confirmation. You had no business being in that trade. And it worked. It just worked. And this will drive you absolutely insane because your brain is hardwired to find cause and effect. Your survival has always depended on understanding that fire burns, that falling hurts, that certain actions lead to certain outcomes. But the market isn't cause and effect. The market is probability distributed across time. And you can't think in probabilities until you stop needing certainty. I remember sitting with a trader once, and he was showing me his journal. Beautiful journal, color-coded, detailed annotations. He'd marked every trade with his reasoning, his analysis, his confidence level, and he was frustrated because his high-confidence trades, the ones where he was certain he'd analyzed it correctly, those lost more often than his medium-confidence trades. And he couldn't figure out why. And I asked him, "What makes a trade high confidence for you?" And he said, "When I can see exactly how it's going to play out. When the chart is so clear that I know what's coming next." And there it was. His certainty was the problem. Because the clearer something looks, the more obvious it appears, the more likely it is that everyone else sees it too. And when everyone sees the same thing, the market tends to do something different. Not because it's malicious, but because markets move on the disagreement between buyers and sellers, and when everyone agrees, there's no one left to push it in that direction. His high-confidence trades were losing because his confidence was based on clarity, and clarity in markets is often an illusion. The paradox, and you're going to hear me use that word a lot because trading is built on paradoxes, the paradox is this. The moment you accept you can't know what will happen next is the moment you become capable of making money consistently, because you stop trading your predictions and start trading your process. You stop saying, "I know this is going to work," and you start saying, "I have an edge that works over time, and this is one execution of that edge." You stop being attached to each individual outcome and start trusting the statistical distribution of many outcomes. Let me make this really practical for you. Think about a casino. The casino doesn't know if the next spin of the roulette wheel will be red or black. They have no idea, and they don't care. They don't need to know, because they're not betting on the next spin. They're betting on thousands of spins. And they know that over thousands of spins, the math works in their favor. That's probability thinking. That's how you have to approach trading. Not, will this trade work? But, am I executing my edge consistently? And is my edge statistically valid? The emotional truth here, and I want you to feel this, not just understand it intellectually, is that you're not losing because you don't know enough. You're losing because you're still trying to know. You're still trying to predict. You're still looking at the chart and asking it to tell you the future. And every time you do that, every time you need to know, you're giving your power away. You're making the market responsible for your emotional state. And that's a game you cannot win. But if you can't know what's coming, and I can see the question forming in your mind already, if you can't know what's going to happen, how do you ever pull the trigger with confidence? How do you take a trade without that certainty? That's stage 2. And stage 2 is where the real work begins. Once you've accepted uncertainty, And that acceptance isn't a one-time thing. You'll have to relearn it 100 times. But once you've started to accept that you can't know what's coming next, the next demolition begins. You realize you can't control the market. And I know, you're thinking, of course I can't control the market. That's obvious. Everyone knows that. Except you don't really believe it yet. You might believe it intellectually, but emotionally, you're still acting like you have control. You still think that if you manage your trade perfectly, if you move your stop at just the right time, if you exit before the reversal, if you get in at the perfect moment, you can bend outcomes in your favor. You're still operating under the illusion that there's a perfect execution, and if you could just find it, just master it, you'd win every time. And then the market teaches you, sometimes gently, usually harshly, that you control exactly one thing: your entry, your exit plan, your position size. That's it. Everything else is noise, pretending to be control. I've watched traders destroy themselves trying to micromanage trades, and it's heartbreaking because they think they're being diligent. They think they're being smart. They're watching every tick. They're adjusting their stops to avoid being stopped out by noise. They're taking profit early because they feel a reversal coming. They're getting back in because they feel like they exited too soon. And every single one of those actions, every single adjustment, is an act of control. And every act of control is an act of fear. And the market punishes fear with surgical precision. Here's what that looks like in practice. You take a trade. Good trade meets all your criteria. You place your stop loss at a logical level based on the structure of the chart. And then the price starts moving against you. Not to your stop, just moving against you. And you start thinking, maybe I placed my stop too tight. Maybe I should give it more room. So you move it. You move it further away because you don't want to be stopped out. And you've just done something catastrophic. You've changed your risk after you entered the trade. You've let the market's behavior influence your plan. And now you're no longer trading your edge. You're trading your fear. Or the opposite. Price moves in your favor. You're up, not to your target, but you're green. And you start thinking, I should take this profit before it goes away. Markets reverse all the time. I've watched profits disappear before. I should just take it and be happy. So you exit. And then you watch the trade go on to hit your original target without you. And you feel sick. Not because you lost money, you made money, but because you abandoned your edge. You let your fear of loss dictate your exit instead of your plan. Every time you do this, every time you control, you're telling yourself a story. The story is, I know better in the moment than I did when I made my plan. I can see something now that I couldn't see then. And that story is seductive because sometimes it's true. Sometimes you exit early and it saves you from a reversal. Sometimes you move your stop and it keeps you in a winning trade. But most of the time, that in-the-moment adjustment is fear masquerading as intuition. And it erodes your ability to trust your edge because now you don't know if your results are coming from your strategy or from your emotional reactions. The paradox here, and it's a beautiful paradox once you see it, is that you gain control by giving it up. You make your decisions in advance. You decide where you'll enter. You decide where you'll exit. You decide how much you'll risk. And then you execute without emotion. You let the market do whatever it's going to do. You don't manage. You don't adjust. You don't interfere. And in that surrender, in that radical acceptance that you can't control what happens next, you find the only kind of control that actually works. Control over yourself. Control over your execution. Control over your consistency. I worked with a trader once who was incredibly intelligent. Brilliant guy. He could read a chart better than almost anyone I'd met. He could tell you exactly where the institutional money was, where the stop runs would happen, where the liquidity was sitting. He understood market structure at a level most traders never reach. And he couldn't make money. He'd been trading for 5 years and he was barely breaking even. And when I watched him trade, I saw why. He couldn't let a trade breathe. He was constantly adjusting, moving stops, scaling out, getting back in. He had an opinion about every tick. And I asked him, "Why do you do that?" And he said, "Because I can see what's coming. I can see when it's about to reverse. I'm using my skill to improve my results." And I said, "Okay, let's test that. For the next 20 trades, you're going to place your stop and your target, and then you're going to close the chart. You're not going to watch it. You're going to let it resolve without you, just to see, just as an experiment." And he looked at me like I'd asked him to cut off his arm. He said, "I can't do that. What if I need to adjust? What if the market changes?" And I said, "Exactly. You're not trading the market. You're trading your need to control the market. And that need is what's killing you." He tried it, reluctantly, and his win rate went up. Not because his strategy got better. The strategy was the same. His win rate went up because he stopped interfering. He stopped letting his fear make decisions. He stopped controlling. And in that space, his edge finally had room to work. The emotional truth here is that you're not failing because you're undisciplined. You're failing because you're still trying to control things you were never meant to control. And the tighter you grip, the more it slips away. So if you can't know, and you can't control, and I can feel the anxiety rising as you're listening to this, if you can't know what's coming and you can't control what happens, what's left? What are you supposed to do? How do you trade without those things? That's stage 3. And stage 3 will break your heart before it sets you free. This is the final stage, the final death, the final surrender. And it's the one that separates the 5% who make it from the 95% who don't. You have to stop being afraid of loss. Not philosophically, not intellectually, not in some abstract, I've read the books kind of way. Viscerally, in your body, in your nervous system. You have to reach a place where a red trade doesn't trigger you, where a stop loss doesn't mean anything about you, where losing becomes as neutral as breathing. Most traders think they've accepted risk because they use a stop loss. They say, "I'm only risking 1% of my account. I've accepted the risk." But accepting risk and being unafraid of loss are not the same thing. Not even close. You can risk 1% of your account and still be terrified of being wrong. You can follow your plan perfectly and still feel like every red trade is a referendum on your intelligence, your worth, your ability to succeed at anything. And that fear, that subtle, insidious fear of loss, is controlling everything you do. It's why you skip trades. It's why you take profit early. It's why you hesitate when your edge says go. It's why you feel sick to your stomach before you hit the buy button. It's why you check your account balance 50 times a day. It's why you can't sleep when you have an open position. The fear of loss is running your entire trading operation, and you're not even aware of it because it's so fundamental to how you experience reality that it feels like just the way things are. Stage 3 is where you discover this. A loss is not a failure. A loss is data. A loss is the market telling you, "Not this time. That's it, nothing more." It's not saying you're stupid. It's not saying your strategy doesn't work. It's not saying you should quit. It's saying, this particular trade, at this particular time, didn't work out. And when you stop interpreting loss as rejection, something miraculous happens. You stop hesitating. You stop second-guessing. You stop lying awake at night playing the what-if game. You take the trade your edge says to take, and you let it resolve without attaching your identity to the outcome. Let me tell you what this looks like in real life. I knew a trader who'd been struggling for years. Smart guy, good strategy, terrible results. And we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what was wrong. Was it the strategy? Was it the risk management? Was it the market conditions? And one day he came to me and he said something that changed everything. He said, "I realized yesterday that I'm not afraid of losing money. I'm afraid of feeling stupid." And that hit me like a freight train because it was so honest, so raw. He wasn't afraid of the dollar amount. He could afford to lose what he was risking. He was afraid of the story he'd tell himself if he lost. The story that said he should have seen it coming, that he should have analyzed it better, that he wasn't smart enough for this. And once he saw that, once he named it, he could start working with it. He started saying to himself before every trade, "This might not work, and that's okay. I'm not psychic. I'm not God. I'm a trader executing an edge that works over time. This trade might be one of the losers, and that doesn't mean anything about me. It just means I'm doing my job." And slowly, painfully slowly, that fear started to dissolve. Not disappear. It still shows up sometimes, but it doesn't run him anymore. The paradox here is profound. The traders who fear loss the least make the most money. Not because they're reckless, not because they don't care, but because they're free. Free to execute. Free to be wrong. Free to take the next trade without carrying the emotional weight of the last one. Free to try again without questioning their entire existence. And that freedom is what consistency looks like. It's not sexy. It's not dramatic. It's just someone taking their trades, managing their risk, and moving on. The emotional truth that I need you to hear, really hear, is that you're not protecting yourself by avoiding loss. You're starving yourself of the only thing that will make you profitable. Experience under fire. Every loss is a lesson. Every stop out is data. Every trade that didn't work is information about what your edge looks like in different market conditions. But you can't learn from losses if you're afraid of them. You can't gather data if you're hiding from the results. You can't build consistency if you're only taking trades when you feel certain, when you feel safe, when you feel like you can't lose. And here's what nobody tells you about the other side of these three deaths. Once you've been through them, once you've surrendered certainty and control and the need to avoid loss, trading becomes simple. Not easy. It's never easy, but simple. You have a process. You execute the process. You let the math work over time. You don't need to know what's coming. You don't need to control the outcome. You don't need to avoid loss. You just need to show up and do the work. I remember the moment this clicked for me. I was sitting at my desk, and I'd just taken a loss. Not a big loss, just a normal stop out. And I realized I felt nothing. Not numbness. Not avoidance. Just nothing. It was like checking the weather and seeing it was cloudy. Okay, it's cloudy. That's information. I'm not upset that it's cloudy. I'm not questioning my decision to check the weather. It's just data. And I realized, this is it. This is what it feels like to be free, to be on the other side. And I wanted that for every trader I worked with because I knew how much pain was waiting for them if they didn't get there. So what do you do with all of this? How do you actually move through these stages instead of just understanding them intellectually? Let's get practical. Let's talk about what you can do right now, today, to start this process. Because understanding the stages doesn't complete them. You still have to do the work. But at least now you know what the work is. First thing, name your stage. Look at your last 10 trades. Pull up your journal, your account history, whatever records you keep, and write down where you deviated from your plan. Not whether you won or lost. Where you deviated. Did you skip trades because you needed to know it would work? That's stage one. You're still addicted to certainty. Did you move your stop or exit early or adjust something mid-trade because you were trying to manage it? That's stage two. You're still trying to control. Did you avoid trading altogether because you couldn't handle another loss? Or did you take trades that weren't in your plan because you were trying to make back what you lost? That's stage three. You're afraid of loss and you don't even realize how much that fear is driving you. You can't heal what you can't name. And most traders are wandering around wondering why nothing's working, and it's because they don't know where they are. They're trying to fix discipline when the problem is certainty. They're trying to fix strategy when the problem is control. They're trying to fix risk management when the problem is fear. Name your stage. Get honest about where you actually are, not where you think you should be. Second thing, reframe one loss. Go back to your worst trade from the last month, the one that still stings when you think about it, the one that still makes you cringe, the one you replay in your mind at 3 in the morning. Pull it up, look at it, and write this at the top of the page. This loss taught me, and then fill in the blank. But here's the key. Don't fill it in with what you should have done differently. Don't say, This loss taught me to wait for confirmation, or this loss taught me not to overtrade. That's strategy stuff. That's surface level. Go deeper. What was the loss showing you about your psychology? This loss taught me that I'm still trying to control outcomes. This loss taught me that I'm afraid of looking stupid. This loss taught me that I'm trading to prove something instead of trading my edge. This isn't about strategy. It's about what you were protecting that you need to let go of. Third thing, practice the pause. Before your next trade, I want you to pause just for 5 seconds. You've done your analysis. You've identified your setup. You're about to click the button. Pause. Take a breath. And ask yourself one question. Am I taking this trade because my edge says to, or because I need to prove something? Am I executing my process, or am I trying to make back yesterday's loss? Am I following my plan, or am I trying to feel a certain way? And if the answer is anything other than, I'm executing my edge, don't take the trade. Not because it won't work. It might work, but because you're not ready. You're trading from the wrong place. And that matters more than whether this one trade wins or loses. And readiness isn't about courage. It's about honesty. It's about being able to say, I'm not in the right headspace right now, and that's okay. I'll wait. I'll come back when I'm clear. That's not weakness. That's mastery. The best traders I know take fewer trades than you'd think, because they're willing to wait for the trades that align with their edge and their emotional state. They're not trying to force it. They're not trying to make something happen. They're just waiting for the intersection of opportunity and readiness. Fourth thing, set an identity-free goal. For the next 20 trades, and I mean this literally, write this down. For the next 20 trades, don't track profit and loss. Don't look at your account balance. Don't calculate your win rate. Track one thing, execution. Did you follow your plan? Yes or no? That's the only score that matters right now. Not how much you made, not how much you lost. Did you do what you said you'd do? Because if you can execute 20 times in a row without attachment to the outcome, if you can take 20 trades where you genuinely don't care if each individual one wins or loses, you've already graduated. You've already moved through the hardest part. You've proven to yourself that you can separate your ego from your execution. And that's the whole game. That's what profitable traders do that losing traders don't. They execute their process regardless of how they feel, regardless of what happened on the last trade, regardless of whether they feel confident or scared. They just execute. And here's what's going to happen. Some of those 20 trades will lose. And you're going to want to care. You're going to want to feel bad about it. To question yourself. To adjust something. Don't. Just mark it down. Followed plan. Yes. Move on. And some of those trades will win. And you're going to want to feel good about it. To feel validated. To feel like you figured it out. Don't. Just mark it down. Followed plan. Yes. Move on. You're training yourself to be neutral, to be a clean executor. And that neutrality is worth more than any strategy, any indicator, any edge you could ever develop. Let's bring this home. You started this video thinking you were looking for a strategy, a secret, some piece of information that would finally make it click. Some indicator, combination, or chart pattern or risk management formula that would be the missing piece. And I get it. That's what we're all looking for when we start. The thing that'll make it make sense. The thing that'll give us an edge. The thing that'll let us win. But what I've shown you today is something different, something harder, and something more true. You don't need more knowledge. You need more death. You need the death of certainty, the death of control, the death of avoidance. And I know how that sounds. Nobody wants to hear that the path forward requires losing parts of themselves. Nobody wants to sign up for psychological demolition. We want the easy way, the fast way, the way that doesn't hurt. But there isn't one. There never was. And anyone who tells you different is selling you something. Here's the reframe that changes everything. You're not losing yourself. You're not being destroyed. You're losing the illusions you built to protect yourself from uncertainty. And those illusions were never you. They were armor. You built them because the world felt scary and you needed to feel safe. You needed to feel like you could predict what was coming. You needed to feel like you had control. You needed to feel like you could avoid pain. And those needs made perfect sense. They kept you alive. They kept you functioning. But armor is heavy, and you can't move freely in it. And in trading, if you can't move freely, if you can't adapt, if you can't flow with what the market's showing you, you can't win. So what's happening in these three stages isn't loss. It's liberation. You're being freed from the weight of needing to know. You're being freed from the exhaustion of trying to control. You're being freed from the prison of avoiding loss. And on the other side, when you've been through all three, you're lighter, you're faster, you're more fluid, you're more present. You're not carrying the weight anymore. You're just trading. If you're in stage 1 right now, stuck in analysis paralysis, needing to know before you act, feeling like you can't pull the trigger until you're certain, you're not indecisive. You're not a coward. You're on the edge of liberation. You're standing at the threshold of something profound. The moment you stop trying to predict and start trusting probability, everything shifts. You stop waiting for perfect. You start executing your edge. And you realize that the confidence you were waiting for doesn't come before the action. It comes after. It comes from executing again and again and seeing that you can handle whatever happens. If you're in stage 2, micromanaging every tick, moving stops, exiting early, getting back in, trying to optimize every single trade, you're not undisciplined. You're not doing it wrong. You're learning the difference between control and surrender. And surrender isn't weakness. Surrender isn't giving up. Surrender is the ultimate strength. It's saying, I've done my part. I've made my plan. I've executed my process. Now I'm going to trust it and let go. That's power. That's mastery. And you're closer to it than you think. If you're in stage 3, avoiding trades because you can't stomach another loss, feeling sick before you click the button, lying awake thinking about your open positions, beating yourself up for every mistake, you're not broken. You're not fragile. You're one reframe away from fearless. Because the second you see loss as tuition instead of failure, the second you understand that every stop out is just the cost of doing business, the second you realize that being wrong doesn't mean anything about you, you become unteachable by pain. You become someone who can try again and again and again without carrying the weight of the past. And that person is unstoppable. Here's what I want you to remember. And I want you to say this out loud if you're alone right now. I want you to hear yourself say it. I am not my wins. I am not my losses. I am the person who shows up, executes, and learns. The market doesn't owe me certainty. It doesn't owe me control. It doesn't owe me comfort. And I don't need any of those things to be profitable. I just need to be willing to become someone new. I just need to be willing to let go of who I was and step into who I'm becoming. And I'm willing. I'm ready. Even if I'm scared, even if it hurts, I'm willing to walk through these stages. I'm willing to be demolished and rebuilt, because on the other side is freedom, and freedom is worth the price. If this video resonated, if you felt something shift, even slightly, even just a crack in the armor, do me a favor, hit that like button. Not for me, not for the algorithm, for yourself. Because that small action, that tiny gesture, is you acknowledging something. It's you saying, I'm ready to see trading differently. I'm ready to stop fighting and start surrendering. I'm ready to move through these stages instead of resisting them. And that acknowledgement matters. It's the first step, and every journey starts with the first step. Drop a comment telling me which stage you're in right now. Stage 1, 2, or 3. No judgment, no shame, just awareness, just honesty. Because the traders who can name where they are always move faster than the ones still pretending. The ones who can say, I'm in stage 1, I'm still addicted to certainty, they're already halfway through it. The ones who can say, I'm in stage 2, I'm still trying to control everything. They're already loosening their grip. The ones who can say, I'm in stage 3, I'm terrified of loss, they're already facing their fear. And facing it is how you move through it. And if you want more of this, more psychology, more truth, more maps through the terrain nobody talks about, hit that subscribe button. Because I'm not here to sell you indicators. I'm not here to show you chart patterns. I'm not here to promise you easy money. I'm here to help you become the kind of person who doesn't need those things. I'm here to walk you through the transformation that every profitable trader has to go through. I'm here to tell you the truth about what this journey actually requires. And if you want that, if you want someone who's going to be honest with you even when the truth is uncomfortable, then you're in the right place. You're not broken. You've just been misled. You've been told that trading is about finding the right strategy when it's really about becoming the right person. You've been told that discipline is about forcing yourself to follow rules when it's really about healing the wounds that make you break them. You've been told that consistency is about repetition when it's really about surrender. And now you know different. Now you have the map. Now you understand the territory. And that understanding changes everything. Now go become who the market needs you to be. Not who you think you should be. Not who your ego wants you to be. Who the market needs you to be. Someone who can sit with uncertainty without needing to know. Someone who can execute without needing to control. Someone who can lose without it meaning anything. That person is already inside you. These 3 stages just burn away everything that's in the way. And yes, it hurts. And yes, it's scary. And yes, it's worth it. Because on the other side is the trader you came here to become. And that trader is waiting for you. So go meet them.